All right, let's go now to an issue I discussed 2 or so weeks ago, the ACT government's shock move to take over the Catholic-owned and run Calvary Hospital, a private hospital in the suburbs of Canberra. The way the Barr government has gone about this is nothing short of appalling, rushing legislation into the parliament with no warning given to staff, patients or carers. And the legislation to take over the hospital is expected now to pass the parliament within a couple of days, with the support, of course, of the Greens. And the ACT government has now received the backing of the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, insisting it's not driven by religion. He says it is not seen as providing any precedent by the ACT government and should not be by anyone else. I don't know that those involved actually believe that. Joining me now to discuss this, the chair of the Calvary taskforce, Fr Tony Percy. Fr Percy, thank you for your time. Last time we spoke, you were holding out that the PM, who talks about the Catholic Church being really important to his, whole sense of self, you were holding out hope that he might support your cause here. Clearly, he's not. He's backing the ACT government. Are you surprised and disappointed by that?
Well, it's an amazing sort of setup here. We've got the Prime Minister of Australia saying he's going to support a compulsory acquisition, which is going to be unlawful, against the rule of law and not on just terms. So he's saying, I'll agree to a compulsory acquisition by the ACT government, which is incredible, with no rule of law and got nothing to do with just terms. So how the Prime Minister has arrived at this position, one really wonders. It's an incredible moment for the Australian Federation, no doubt about it.
Just so people at home can follow it, Tony, what's happening here is if they tried to do it under existing legislation, take over the Calvary Hospital, they couldn't do it, right? They'd be in and out of the courts, they'd have to pay a huge amount of compensation, they'd have to have an argument for it. But what they're doing is actually putting through legislation in the parliament that absolves them of all their requirements under the law now and basically gets them the hospital with a deal with the Greens. Have I got that right?
Yeah, so they introduced the legislation just a few weeks ago saying, right, we won't have our normal standing orders for this particular piece of legislation. We'll suspend it. Now, in the ACT, you've got to have 2 months of discussion, committees, reports, etc., on the bill, which then becomes the Act. But the government said, oh no, we won't be doing that. And then furthermore, they say, well, normally in a compulsory acquisition, what happens is that the government sort of has to do it on just terms. So in the ACT, they've got to do it according to the Land Acquisition Act of 1994. And the government said, well, that won't apply in this particular case. Now, that's the Land Acquisition Act that says this is how you do compulsory acquisition. So, again, here we've got the Prime Minister of Australia. I mean, this is quite incredible, saying I'm going to support a compulsory acquisition done not according to the rule of law in the ACT and not on just terms. So this is quite unprecedented. And one wonders if you can do it with a medical institution like a Calvary, then you can do it to educational institutions. And then one thinks, well, where else are they going then? Are they going south to Victoria? Are they going north to Queensland? So if I was in charge of major business in any of the parts of New South Wales or Queensland or Victoria, I'd be writing to the Health Minister and the Education Minister saying, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen in our jurisdiction? Can I have a guarantee that you won't be doing this, the government of New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, that you won't be doing this sort of activity that's happening in the ACT? It's incredible that the Prime Minister of the country has come out and done this. I cannot imagine John Curtin or Ben Chifley or Bob Hawke or Paul Keating doing this or supporting this sort of behaviour. It's incredible.
And look, right around the country, there's dozens and dozens of hospitals run by faith organisations, aged care homes, all manner of facilities are run by religious organisations. But this would extend this precedent to a mine, let's say, or a power station or a gas mine, anything that's owned by a private company. If it can be just seized, basically by legislation, we're down a pretty slippery slope. And if they think they need another hospital for Canberra, why don't they acquire a block of land and build a hospital? Why acquire yours by force, your hospital, only to tear it down and build a new one? So what's driving this?
Well, that's right. I mean, the government was in conversation with Calvary about building another hospital, and Calvary took it on good faith. But then by November last year, everything went silent, and the government must have got on its bike and sort of started preparing the legislation, so that here we find ourselves with a compulsory acquisition done not according to the rule of law and not on just terms. So as to why the government wants to do this, I mean, people are dismayed at the care they receive in the main public hospital. So why would you take over Calvary? You can imagine, Peter, what would happen down there in Victoria with the Mercy Hospital, or say in New South Wales with St Vincent's in Sydney, or the Mater in Queensland. It's quite preposterous, but it's a real threat. And we have to get people to get into the Prime Minister and email the Prime Minister. It's easily done. Just type in email Prime Minister into your browser, and then you can send a very brief message saying, this is what we feel about this, this is what we think about it. But again, you know, the previous wonderful Labor Prime Ministers of this country, can you imagine them doing this, or standing on the sideline, or coming forward like Albanese and saying, oh, this is great, go right ahead? It's incredible, and every Australian citizen should know that they're under threat.
All right, take Tony Percy's advice there. Email the PM. Easily found, as you said, jump on your search engine, you'll go straight through to his email address. Tony Percy, thank you.